Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Operation Miss podcast. I can barely get through this introduction today because I am so excited for you all to meet Christina. But for you all who have been with us for the last couple of years on this podcast, you know that we bring ladies and providers to the conversation so that they can speak with our listeners and women can understand how they can learn their bodies, trust their bodies, prepare their bodies throughout every phase of womanhood, and just learn how to do it in a way that's authentic to them. And so, with every person that we bring on, we learn how they did it so that the listeners can see themselves in our guests. And Christina, I just want to speak to you. I think that you are one of the most beautiful women, beautiful moms. When I met you in person for the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, she missed her calling. She should have been a supermodel. And it absolutely matched the beauty that I knew resided on the inside of you from the first conversation that we had. So I cannot wait for everyone to fall in love with you like I have, but I'm just grateful, so grateful that from the beginning you invited us on this journey, and I don't take that for granted. So please introduce yourself to everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine. I have to say that the last 9, 10 months wouldn't have been the same without the having you guys journeying with myself and my husband, and now Sasha, my daughter. And so to introduce myself, Christina Cinema. I don't know what to say. I'm now a mother. My
Yes.
daughter. My daughter was born November 1st, um, and here in Atlanta. I'm married. My husband is amazing. I'm so very thankful for him that we've been married for 3 years now. And the last, well, yeah, 3 years. And so the last 3 years have been a very amazing, wonderful journey. A big part of that journey was us trying to conceive. And I would have to say, I'm very thankful for his support, his wisdom throughout the entire journey, because it wasn't easy the entire time. So it was really great. And what else would I say? For a living, I'm a pharmacist. So it's really funny because I'm sure Catherine would even laugh at this. Like, you have a profession, but sometimes when you're going through something on your own personally, some things that just like goes out the window, or you need to be reminded by somebody. And so going through this health journey, I was even say, or whatever it is, stuff that's going on with my body, sometimes I needed that confirmation, or I needed someone to remind me of something when I was going through it myself. But I'm a pharmacist by training, and I'm on maternity leave right now, which is also mind blowing, and I feels really good to be able to focus on my family and myself right now before going back to work. So, and the last thing I'll say is I am a believer. What's really important about my identity is that I am a child of God. And so it was really a blessing to have somebody who was professional, who knew healthcare, who cared about my body, but also cared about my spiritual faith journey as well. It's still very important. So anyway, so that's all I'll say for now, unless I missed something you want me to share.
No, not at all. And I love that with you led with everything that makes you you. And I believe that being a believer is what got you from one phase to the next, from one week to the next sometimes, right? And I
Yes.
just think that having that gift of just knowing that you were divinely designed, and that if there is ever any doubt, it goes out the window because we know that we have something that we can believe in. And I love that you talked about that as being a part of who you are, because it is a huge part of who you are and why I think your light shines so brightly.
Thank you.
So let's talk about, you're welcome, this beautiful journey to
Yeah.
pregnancy. So can you tell us, first of all, if you don't mind sharing, how
Yeah.
old are you?
So I'm 37 right now.
So you are 37 years young.
37
And
years, yeah.
and how long did it take you and David to conceive?
So it took like about 2.5 years of consistent trying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so can you tell us, because I know that at one point you were considering uh
IVF.
IVF, right? And
Yes.
so what happened? What happened?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, like, I think our journey to conceive, it was less about the time frame and it was more about what was happening in the process. And I was trying to think of, prior to this podcast, I was trying to think of the best way to concisely put it together and how we got to IVF. So to start, when we got married in 2021, that's when we started trying, right? We knew that we wanted to have kids. I had that thought in my mind, which now I know is, again, one of those like man made fears that, oh, I'm this age. And so we need to hurry up. So um, we started trying. After about 6 months of trying and nothing happening, I took the advice of a lot of healthcare professionals, which is, especially when you are a certain age, you should, try to find out about your body, see what's going on. So I started doing that. And I think this is one thing that a lot of people, well, at least what I empathize, I think with other people now that have gone through the experiences, sometimes that takes some time, right? You just don't go to the doctor and you get an answer right then and there. You go to the doctor, an appointment is made a month out, then you have to do several different tests, you and your partner. So that took some months. Everything was looking good until there's a test that's done called the HSG. I don't know what that stands for right now, I forgot, but that's where they check your fallopian tubes. And then they did another test on a different week. So the first week I went, they did a test where they were checking my ovaries. And then they did another test with HSG. When they checked my ovaries, it's very interesting because I felt like I was in an environment where they really didn't do a thorough job or care, because they weren't able to see my left ovary, which they kept asking if I had one. And I'm like, I have one. So I kind of left the appointment with them having a question mark as to kind of how to get to my ovary. They couldn't find a healthcare professional that was present at the office at time that could find it with the machinery that they had. Then 2 weeks later, I went and I did the HSG. And I remember that. I'll probably remember that day forever. I went in, and of course, these tests are already not comfortable. So they're checking your fallopian tubes by seeing if there's fluid that goes through the fallopian tubes, I think into the uterus and out. I don't know. Can't remember now. And of course, I'm seeing the screen right there in front of me. So they had students in there. And so the HCP who was doing it, I remember she did it and nothing went through the tubes, which I was like fearful for. And then I see it right in front of me. And I remember the healthcare professional being like, oh, and then she stops. And then she's like, oh, wow. She's like, it's not going through either one of them. They must be both blocked. And so she looks at the students and they kind of do one of these like, like things. And they were like, you'll have to talk to your doctor about that, which I knew my next appointment was not for another 4 weeks. So I look at the students, each one of them comes up and gives me a hug, which was very weird to me. It felt like, oh my gosh, like this is it. And half
Mm.
me being someone who understands the body enough to know that the fallopian tubes were important, I left that doctor's appointment very discouraged and upset, because I knew I wasn't really going to get any answers or anything until another 4 weeks. And if we were going to try again, because we were at that point where every cycle we were trying to get pregnant, I was discouraged for this next month, right? So we ended up having a doctor's appointment with the doctor. And I remember that appointment forever too, because she basically told us that she knows we have a fibroid, two fibroids. That's the reason why they couldn't see the left ovary, because it was really huge. And then she also mentioned about the fallopian tubes, which she felt that the fibroid was blocking the fallopian tubes, which she didn't know. So she wanted me to go do an MRI. But before that, she suggested we do IVF. So David and I were thinking, because she did say that the fibroid was so big that it was taking up a big part of the uterus. So we're thinking, well, how can we I mean, I'm pretty sure we can still do IVF, but it'll be very uncomfortable because I'll have these fibroids in here. So my husband and I are sitting here and we're like, this is not adding up. And I even remember saying, I don't think I want to do the egg retrievals and all of that with a fibroid. It's kind of not adding up. And she's like, you know what, you're right. But think about it. You don't want to waste time. You're older, your eggs, you don't want your eggs to, because you're at that age. Because I was 30. I guess I was 35 at that time. So she's like, you're at that age. So it's just like right there at that time, we want to conserve those eggs. Why don't you just do it now? And then you can do the surgery later. And I remember talking with some of my girlfriends that I pray with, and I'm like, I'm in this place where it's almost like I would be making a decision based on fear about my eggs because of timing. Because the decisions were either we do the surgery, which would mean do the surgery, and then we would have to wait 6 months before trying again, which the doctor was saying that will push you into 36, and your eggs will be as good. Or do the egg retrieval now, which seemed like that didn't make sense, and then do the fibroid surgery later. So it was almost like a fear thing. I'm thankful for the decision that we made. I'm thankful for the people that were in my life at the time. I'm thankful for being able to pray and have the confidence of, no, like, let's trust God. My eggs will be fine. Um, let's do the surgery. So we ended up doing the surgery and we moved to found a whole other doctor. So we went through the whole testing process again. So that was also very frustrating. I did 3 MRIs just to determine where this fibroid was. And we did the surgery and then we had to wait 6 months. And then after we got released to be able to try, we still weren't conceiving. So we tried for a few months and then we got discouraged. I mean, at least I was getting discouraged because it's like we did this whole surgery, I recovered and this and that. And um, we went back to a fertility specialist to have conversations again. And I did another HSG, same situation. One was completely blocked and the other was it was somewhat blocked. And so, of course, at this point, they're saying best chance is IVF. If not, you can run the risk for ectopic pregnancies, not getting pregnant at all. And I think this was in January of 2024. So this year, January of this year, where we had that conversation. I remember fasting all of January because I just wanted to feel comfortable with the next step of IVF. At the end of January, we felt like it was fine for us to move forward. So we started the process of researching somebody. So again, this stuff takes time. And then when we found somebody, they weren't available till June. So we're like, fine. And so, but it was between that time and June that I know in my heart, I was like, let's keep trying. And it's funny because when I look back now, I don't think I was thinking about ectopic pregnancy or any of these complications. And I'm so thankful God had protected us from. We didn't experience any of that, even though we tried for still a couple of months post finding out about my fallopian tubes. And then in end of March, is when we found out that we were pregnant. And it's funny because I had an MRI at the beginning of March showing completely blocked fallopian tube on one side and very like almost blocked on the other side. And it was that month she was conceived. And we found out at the end of that month that we were pregnant. And then a day after we found out we were pregnant, I started bleeding. And that's when I went to the ER. And then they confirmed after a few hours of being in the ER that there was a heartbeat, I was pregnant, and that I had a
Chorionic hemorrhage.
subchorionic hemorrhage. Yes. So that's the story. I'm sorry I went long, but I wanted to kind of share the different things involved in it. Oh, and then I ended up still having a fibroid while I was pregnant. So that's a whole other thing.
Oh my goodness. No. So first of all, I want to say, I want you to take your time because the women who need to hear this need to hear this. The providers who need to hear this need to hear what women are going through and thinking and how it makes them feel when they hear certain things. And it all matters. And it all led up to you. You know, people listening, I think we're going to think that you had something done to your fallopian tubes to get pregnant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And y'all didn't. You just
Yeah.
removed the fibroid, kept
Yeah.
having sex,
Yeah.
and here you are with a
Yeah.
whole baby
Yes.
with almost two completely blocked
Yes. Yeah.
fallopian tubes.
Even after the fibroid surgery, right? So the fibroid surgery removed the fibroid, which I
Right.
think is so good. But my fallopian tubes were still blocked even after I had the surgery. Well, one completely blocked and the other one somewhat, but enough where I didn't HSG and the fluid wasn't coming through either one of them.
But the sperm got through.
Sperm got
The
through.
sperm, the egg, the everything got
Everything.
through.
And even like I said, I think it's without complications. And it's like unfortunately, like many women unfortunately experience these complications without even knowing what it is. And we were just trying without even knowing that God was, I didn't know that God was protecting me from these complications that are at increased, you're at increased risk for them. Let's put it that way, when you do have the issues with like fallopian tubes and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really like it because I feel like a lot of times we do look to IVF because we feel like it is a solution. And it is a solution for some
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
But it is also okay if someone just stands firm in their belief that we can do this, it can be done. I don't want people to, it's like you said, make decisions based out of fear. Because if you start making decisions like that, anything that comes up that's unexpected will result in you continuing to make decisions out of fear.
Yes, yes, 100%. And I can speak
Mhm.
to that more too, because I think that even throughout the pregnancy, like you're saying, and it was something else I was thinking of. Oh, I think one of the things in the process of me trying to get pregnant, I think I remember God giving me a piece that that this time was important. This time during while I'm waiting was important, and that He was hearing my prayer. But I think when I prayed about the IVF, where I sat was that if this is what God was going to use in order for us to get pregnant, that's great. But I also still believe in His sovereignty and that it could still be done without it. So I think those two things were happening at the same time. So that's why I wasn't completely shocked when it happened, even though I was still shocked when it happened. It was like I was still believed that like my entire belief wasn't in it can only be IVF. That's what I think it was. It was the fact that God can use and do anything. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Oh
yeah,
my gosh. I just love that. Because I do remember when we first talked and I was like, no, I'll hear back from her in a couple months. She's going to be pregnant. Like in my head, I don't know. It's like you just have this sense,
yeah,
like you said, that you had a sense. And the sense doesn't come all the time, but when it does, it's really freeing because then you just realize that it's not in my hands.
yes, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now we're pregnant and we start bleeding. How do you feel? Can you walk us through? How does it
Yes.
feel? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just like, oh my gosh. I think that or I was like on a call with one of my mentors. She's my business coach. She's also a believer, though, and she knew about my journey as well. And so I just started bleeding when I was on the call with her. And I immediately get scared. So I'm thinking of all the things. And I remember with her, she's very strong in her faith. She's like, well, let's start praying. And I'm like, I need to go to the doctor. That's what I'm thinking in my head, and I'm trying not to like respond like that. So I was like, okay, calm down, because you just calm. So I actually finished my call with her, which was a additional 30 minutes. She was like, and she was asking me work questions, and I was answering. At one point, she said, if you feel like you need to get off, she's like, I'm not trying to hold you or anything. She was like, please do. She was like, but you're going to be fine. Like we prayed about it, etc. I said, no, it's finished. I stayed on with her for 30 minutes. We got off. And then I was encouraged by how she didn't just jump to the conclusion of like the worst thing, right? She was still had this outlook of very positive that this is going to happen. Everything is going to be fine. It was a different, uh, it was just different. And so I got off, I went inside. My sister and brother-in-law were in there. So Lisa and Jay, you know them, and my husband was in there. And this was also during a really important time because my in-laws, my sister and brother-in-law had just adopted a baby, which that was another very long story, and God had blessed them. And it was my first time meeting him. We were going to surprise my parents with that we were pregnant that night with my new nephew. But I walked in and I said, "We can't do this. I'm bleeding, right?" And of course, they all like are very supportive. We end up going to the emergency room, which I don't like emergency rooms. We were in there for a long time. And I remember going in the back when they did an ultrasound, and they didn't let me see the ultrasound, and she wasn't saying anything. So I was freaking out, but I wasn't talking because I didn't want to ask anything until I felt like the person that could answer it was going to give me all the information.
Mhm.
Um, and so I just didn't say anything. And then it was like quite a couple of hours later when I was with David that they came in and said, everything is fine. So, yeah, I think I was just very scared, but I'm thankful that in the moment I was talking to somebody who, and I think you told me this one time during the pregnancies, it was a reminder of when, we're weak, God is strong, but
Yeah.
also he uses other people as well, right? So like I was really relying on her at this time. And I think it's hard sometimes. You have to discern, like, is it serious enough for me to make moves and do something? Or can I trust this wisdom and discernment that I'm having right now to not freak out and to make, certain moves and whatever it is, right? And I think at that moment, it was really good that I was talking to her. I mean, I waited the 30 minutes and then we did what we needed to do. So I'm thankful to God for the fact that although I was very scared, I really wasn't, it wasn't overwhelming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You know what I love about this part of your story is that it is faith plus work, right? And that is just
Yeah.
biblical. And so,
Yes.
for sure, you have faith for the best possible outcome. And it's okay to get out there and do the work of figuring out, well, what is going on? What can I control? What can I not control? And just having all the information. And that's what I
Yeah.
feel we have to do, especially in that first trimester for moms listening, because if you look online, it'll say, oh, yeah, a lot of people bleed during the first trimester. So you may just assume that the bleeding is normal. Instead
Yeah.
of assuming, choose a provider who will look into it every time it concerns you. Because at the
Mhm.
end of the day, it is better to look into it than to ignore it, and then we have a
Yes.
miscarriage, right?
Yes. Yes.
In pregnancy ending early when it could have potentially been addressed. And
Yes.
so I remember when we were corresponding, will you tell people how long you bled?
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you remember, and
Yeah.
how big the clots were? I mean, I remember, pictures and just like making sure that it's just blood and not the
Yeah.
fetus and
Yeah.
reaching. I mean,
It was scary. Yeah.
every bleed deserves attention. And that's what I think everyone needs to understand, that even if you can't do anything about it, let's make sure that this time of bleeding is not the time that I need an intervention.
Yes. No, that's so good. By the way, is it getting very dark where I am?
No, you look beautiful.
Okay. My daughter's just starting to fuss. Can you give, I know
Go
I'm on is it
ahead.
okay for 1 second for me to just tell my husband to come get her?
Absolutely. Or for you to
Okay.
bring
Thank
her, feed her, do whatever you want.
you. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
So you sacrificed your life so I could be free, so I could be whole. So I could tell everyone I know. Hallelujah.
I'm back.
You're
And I was able to put the
back.
light on because she was in here napping. Okay.
That looks great. That looks great. I didn't even realize your light. I think because it was so on your face, I could see
Yeah.
everything. But this is
Yeah.
perfect, and I'll cut it,
Okay. Good.
so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But no, that's really good. And I didn't, but thank you for reminding me. So I actually bled the entire first trimester. Um, and so it was a consistent bleed, where I was like, I remember you telling me, as well as the doctors at the time, that to definitely come back in if I bled through 2 pads or even one, I think, per hour. And so the first 2 weeks after that first bleed, it was enough where I was really just trying to make sure I wasn't like filling up one pad, which I wasn't, but every time I went to the bathroom, I mean, it was actual blood. So that freaked me out. But again, it was almost like we talked almost every day. I was just, it was like, I think I remember you saying earlier at the beginning of our conversation, like weekly, just getting through every week. At that time, I was just getting through every day. Like I was just, okay, like we got through this day. But then I started having clots, and I had 2 big clots from what I remember in my first trimester. And I felt it as it was coming out in both times. And it was just the most scary experience. It was very scary. The first time, I think I took it out, and then I think out of fear, I just threw it back in and flushed it. I remember that. The second time I pulled it out, and it was big. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how and where is this coming from? And how is this not impacting the baby? And we did a lot of texting and conversations, like what the next step should be, just to make sure everything's okay. And I think at that time, for me mentally, what was a little challenging was the fact that it was like in the middle of a work day, and at that time I hadn't shared with my boss or my team. So I lead a team of professionals across the country. And I didn't tell them nor my boss. And so when this would happen, I'm thinking, well, I have calls back to back during the day. Do I have time to run and, to the doctor or whatever else? And so just really learning to prioritize myself. And I think that when we found out it was a subchorionic hemorrhage and I was having the clots, and there was, I think they had provided guidance that I should not travel. I think it was. I don't
We ended
remember.
up chatting. She gave you the option, and then we ended up chatting, and you said that you could move it and do it in the second trimester. Do you remember that?
The traveling?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes, that's
Yeah.
what it is. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
That's right. There were like 2 big work trips that I had. And I mean, prior to this, I was never like a workaholic person, but I definitely work hard and I travel a lot. And the Lord has blessed me with a really, really, really amazing job that allows me to travel. But there's a lot of responsibility. And there were 2 trips that I really wanted to be present for, right? I felt like it was important for me to be present for. It's important for me to represent my team, had these meetings, and I made the decision not to do it, that I would travel in the second trimester. And I remember that I had to really kind of tell my boss, what was going on. So I think that was kind of also a step of faith for me because, I was in my first trimester and I was telling people that I was pregnant. So even it was almost the same type of faith move as when I called the IVF clinic and told them we're canceling the IVF. Because remember, our IVF appointment was in June, which was in my second trimester. So, which took a while for us to schedule that. So it was almost as if we canceled that, if anything was to happen, it would take a long time for us to get again. So I remember that plus telling my boss at the same time I'm not traveling because I'm pregnant were 2 things where I was acknowledging, yes, this is a miracle and a gift that God has given and everything was going to be fine. So, anyway, yes, we was not going to travel until second trimester, and I also there was a huge personal trip my best friends were getting married in Hungary.
Mhm.
And so that was also scheduled for my second trimester. But I'm just thinking, I'm like, there's no way I'm not going to do this in my bleeding, et cetera, et cetera. The last day of my first trimester was the last day that I bled. I didn't
Such a
anymore after
blessing,
that. It
right?
was
Yes.
done.
And that's what I love for the moms that are listening. There are people who bleed and they end
Mhm.
up losing their baby. But there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who bleed and the babies survive. And so we cannot let that mindset of I'm bleeding, something is going to go wrong impact us. And what I love is that you would say, okay, if I'm going up in the air, is this going to affect my baby's oxygen? If I
Yeah.
do this, I mean, it was just like you're constantly thinking, how can I protect this
Yeah.
little life that God has entrusted me
Yeah.
with? And
Yeah.
any question that you could ask and get assurance that it was the right decision,
Yeah.
or that maybe you should delay it. You just
Yeah.
took the steps with the objective information that you had and
Mhm.
protected Sasha. When I think about the way that you protected Sasha even before you got pregnant, it's like you got pregnant and you went into like this baby is going to make it here. And if she doesn't, it will not be because of anything that I did,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And I got
Right.
to
Right.
just
Yeah.
watch you and David because I remember, I can't remember when I started thinking of David like the David in the Bible, but I
Yeah.
was like,
Oh
man,
yeah.
y'all stand on faith and you make moves based on faith and you don't let fear stop you. You
Yeah.
just get the information so that you can do what you can do safely and continue
Yeah.
living your life. And I just thought,
Yeah.
what a beautiful testimony of what it looks like to really just walk hand in hand with your
Yeah.
partner and with God and with prayer warriors around
Yeah.
you. It's almost like you're inoculated from the
Yeah.
reality of the world
Yeah.
because you've
Yeah.
decided that you're just going to focus on keeping your baby safe. It was so beautiful. It is so beautiful to see. It's so beautiful, Christina.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And also, too, the fibroid itself, that was also another cause of fear for me a little, where, I had heard stories. Oh, let me say something about that. That was really encouraging that you would do. In my mind, sometimes I would be thinking of these stories, the stories where things did not go well. And yes, it does happen in life. But there's also sometimes where like you have these miracle stories or stories where things just go well. And sometimes we just don't spend time thinking about that. And that reminds me of that verse. I don't remember where it is right now, but it's like, think on things that are pure, noble,
Yes.
righteous, like these things. It's like you can spend so much time thinking about the bad stories when there are good ones. And I think that's what you encouraged me to do. And, even when you can't find stories of people around you, there's stories in the Bible. And I think that's what I started trying to find some of those, which throughout the entire pregnancy, there were certain stories I consistently try to remind myself of that will be like an indelible memory for me of my pregnancy, those particular stories. So anyway, I think that helped with the fear. So whenever I did get fearful of the bleeding, which was just the first trimester, and then the second and third obviously was the fibroid, which there's a miracle story with that. I did ask different people to pray about that, and they were consistent at just checking in, because every time I had an ultrasound, which because I had the fibroid, I was going to a perinatal high risk doctor, I think every 4 weeks. And then closer to the end, it was every 2 weeks. And they would do an ultrasound, and they would always measure the fibroid. And at the beginning, the first and second trimester, it was growing. But then it stopped growing at the end of the second trimester. And she just continued to grow. And I remember the very last perinatal appointment, which was a week before my C-section. So I had to have a C-section because of the fibroid surgery I had before. And I remember we were about to leave, and the doctor said, "You are released. You don't have to come back here anymore. The fibroid is not a concern." And I don't, they obviously don't know how big that was for me because that's something we have been praying about. And every night I would tell her that she just needs to grow and not worry about anything else in there,
Wow.
because of the other stories that I had heard. And I know there's lots of women that do have successful pregnancies with fibroids. I know that. But I also knew some of the not so great stories too. So, because when you have a fibroid, when you're pregnant, you can't do anything. Like, it's not, you can't get it removed, right? So you can, like, I know there's other things that maybe potentially could be done. But anyway, I just wanted to share that to you, that I think that that was,
Yes.
also really great.
So I want to tell you something. So first of all, I think it's Philippians 4:8. That's one of my favorite.
Yes.
If it's not, it's definitely in Philippians. And
Yeah,
then is it? Yeah, I
I think so.
remember reaching out to Dr. Callens. Dr. Callens is the OB, the one that was kind of guiding us, right, with the
Yes.
bleeding. And I remember her saying, she's going to have a girl because those girls are survivors. And so when you sent the cake saying that it was a girl, I sent it to her and she was like, I knew it. I knew it. I mean, she was so excited because
That's
we had all
awesome.
decided that
Yes.
your baby was going to thrive. There was just
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
there was no other end,
Yeah.
right, to your story.
Yeah.
And so it was really neat that as an OB, she was like, even when it seems like there is nothing you can do, just stand
Yeah.
on faith, like what you were doing. And
Yeah.
when you said, every night you would tell her, just grow, baby, don't worry about
Yeah.
what's in there. That
Yeah.
matters so much
Yeah.
because there's a lady, and she was one of our very first conversations, and her water broke at 17 weeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
her OB was like, look, you have a 5% chance of survival. Your baby has a 2% chance. You need to just let me stop the process now. And her husband looked at each other and were like, with God, all things are possible. And
Mhm.
they stayed pregnant. And every night she prayed, God, be the amniotic fluid. God, be the amniotic fluid. And that baby was born and is thriving. And her OB showed up because she didn't feel like she could support the
Yeah.
pregnancy,
Yeah.
because normally the protocol is to terminate it. But she came to the delivery room and she said, in 20 years, I have never seen this.
Wow.
And I started thinking about it. I was like, we never see the miracle
Yeah.
because we stop the miracle, right? And when I think about like Elizabeth and Zacharias,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
and God shuts him up
Yeah.
because he spoke down. I'm like,
Yeah.
he's serious.
So that's one of my story. That's one of the stories that,
Wow.
and it's not the Elizabeth part; it's that part. It's like the Zacharias part. It's like when God shut him up because he didn't want doubt to be a part of Elizabeth's story until
Right.
Elizabeth had the baby. And it's like, it's
Oh,
not that Elizabeth. It's not that. I mean, the other piece of that story is I don't think Elizabeth wasn't not nervous. Elizabeth probably was nervous. That's fine. And I think that there's a grace part that I'm thankful that God has grace for us when we're nervous. But he was like, we don't have time for you to be scaring Elizabeth. We don't have time for that.
that's
I love
right.
that. I love that. Like
I
God's
love
like,
that too. And my son and I were discussing this a couple of days ago
yeah.
because Zacharias doesn't get his voice back until day 8 when they name him John. And what I
Oh
thought was
no.
so beautiful was that they asked Elizabeth, what are we going to name him? And they assumed that he would be named after his dad. And
Yeah.
she was like, John.
Yeah.
And they were like, you're going to have to write this down. Do you agree with this? And he wrote John.
Yeah.
And that's when he got his voice
Uh-huh.
back. And I thought,
Yeah. He
had
didn't
to
have one.
prove that that angel was like, you heard the angel, you believe the angel. That's why your baby's here. I don't
Yeah.
know. I just thought,
It's crazy.
yeah. But I love
It's
what you
big.
said. We don't have time for
Yeah.
doubters in the circle. I want you in the circle in case things don't go right.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
please, by all means, I
Right.
need you there to pick us
Right.
up. But we
Right.
will not speak doubt at
No,
all.
won't speak out. That's
No.
huge. Like the words you say, like what you spend time thinking about and saying. So yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. Okay, so we travel. You're having a
Yes.
great, I mean,
Yes.
you lived your best life
Yeah.
during your
I
pregnancy.
we went to
Like,
Budapest for a wedding. She was there with me with that. We had a layover in Paris, which I remember. So so originally I had all my flight and travel with my husband, which we were going to do. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to come. So it was just me. And I mean, he couldn't go because his green card, we're still waiting for it. So if he travels, he can't get back in the country. So we weren't going to risk that.
Right.
So we had prayed about me going. Should I go? Should I not? We made the decision that I would go, but we adjusted the flight so that I'm not gone for so long, right? But unfortunately, the one flight that we did do had a layover in Paris, and when I got to Paris, they didn't. My flight to Budapest was non-existent, so I was basically to purchase all the flight. It was a whole thing. I was just like, I want to keep my stress down, So I traveled for work for a little bit in the second trimester, New York, Denver. I remember calling you about Denver because at that time a lot of coworkers were starting to like try to get me scared. They're thinking, you can't go to Denver. The altitudes is too much for your kid. For your baby and pregnancy. And I remember getting the facts and information from you. And then still going, like even with the facts and information, still going and trusting God. Like
Yes.
it's fine. Like He's got me. Everything's good. And then also not really having conversations with those coworkers while I was there.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I
Just-
love this. And because a lot of people do get nervous about not only traveling, but traveling to a place with higher altitudes, right?
right.
And so I just want to, so when we had our conversation, it was more like you have the data. So
Yeah.
if you're willing to check your data while you're there, you notice, wow, when I'm sleeping, my oxygen is really dropping.
Yeah.
Well, you come home and you were like, yes. And I was like, okay, well, there's nothing to worry about, right? Because most people are over there. They don't know what's happening. They are not watching their data.
Yeah.
It could be that something is going wrong and you would never know it. And so, or they would never know it.
Yeah.
But just for people listening, if you live in Denver and when your pregnancy starts, your body has really already accommodated for the altitude change. And so it's not really a big deal. But if you live in Georgia and you go to Denver and you stay for like 3 months, that's a lot of exposure to the higher altitude. But if you go for a couple of days, what research says is you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so what we really try to do though, is make sure, okay, we know the research, but let's see what my body does. So even if research says you can do 3 to 5 days, let's just check and see, am I tolerating this well? And so I loved having those kind of conversations with you so that you could go and have a peace of mind. And then I love the part you added, which was just not being around people who interrupt your peace of mind without objective data. Right. Because for some reason we corresponded when you had your layover with Paris. I don't know if you got a bunch of sleep that day or like if it was something.
Oh, yeah.
And I messaged you and I was like, hey, what's going on? I'm trying to think of what it was. Maybe it was.
I remember prioritizing getting rest because I ended up getting a hotel room because I was in Paris almost for like a full day and a half. So I ended up getting a hotel room, a nice one, rested. It could have been that. I don't remember, but yeah.
I think so. And I love what you said about just keeping your stress down.
Yeah.
Because it's so important. And when you think about some of the things that people run into, premature delivery, preeclampsia, miscarriage, high blood pressure. A lot of times during the pregnancy, when you look at research, they link it back to stress. So why not have something that's monitoring your stress and you can say, okay, yeah, this is too much, or I'm going to continue with this because my body is fine.
Yeah.
That's
good.
Okay, so now, okay, because we're getting up to delivery now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh. So leading up to the delivery, how were you feeling? Were you excited? Were you nervous? Like, how did you feel?
Oh my gosh. I think this was a full, like, not only pregnancy journey, but I think faith journey for me. And, I think almost like every week I got more excited. I probably felt the most beautiful during that time than I had prior to, or it was an opportunity to really embrace my body, how God had made it, exploring it that way. Thankful for my husband, like the entire time. He was so supportive and so loving and like so he admired, like I could tell, like I could feel that he admired me like the more I was pregnant. And I actually didn't mind the doctor's appointments. I liked them because I got a chance for us to see ultrasound and then all of that. And so, although there were still moments of like me being nervous here and there every once in a while, just because it came with it, I think I was also really, really excited. I think, in addition to that story with Elizabeth and Zacharias, the other story that God had given me was I don't know if you remember. So when Joshua and Caleb were sent to kind of look into the land of Canaan, because I think that was the land that God had promised the Israelites. And Moses sent Joshua and Caleb and like I think 8 other people to check it out. And I think, so I might be messing up the numbers. I thought a total was 10, and Joshua and Caleb were part of the 10, but I could be mixing this up. Joshua and Caleb came back to Moses and said, "Oh my God, what God promised us, it looks amazing. We can do this. We can, yes, there's soldiers out there, but we can totally conquer them and get in there." The other ones that went were like, they're giants. They're like, we can't do this. And I felt like the Lord was telling me, this is, you prayed for this. I answered the prayer. This is promises that God has answered, or has promises that He's made that He's going to fulfill. And when God gives us it, we should trust Him in completely fulfilling it, or trust Him in what He's giving you, right? Like say, okay, God is a giver of good gifts, or I'm literally seeing how God's blessing me, like accept it, right? And so that particular story is one that I held throughout the entire time. So even as I got closer and closer to it, and I was able to feel her and this and that, that was the story that I kept trying to remember. That I wanted to be like Joshua and Caleb, and not like the other ones, who
Yes.
even the closer you get, you're still doubting what God can do. So anyway, yes, I felt really, really good. And even when it came to the C-section, which that knew it was a planned C-section, which I was at least happy about that, because I knew that I didn't have to go into it stressed, right? Because it was already scheduled. I knew who it was going to be, Lord willing. Even if it wasn't going to be her, I knew the other people that it could potentially be. So we were very excited the week up going up to the C-section. It was every night we did something, because we were like, we have only a few more days and it's just us, so just to kind of like celebrate each other and celebrate what's about to happen, so I felt very relaxed going into November 1st.
Yeah, yeah, that is so beautiful, so beautiful. Okay, so you have your sweet baby. Can you tell us, how was it post delivery in the hospital?
Yeah.
How was the delivery? How was breastfeeding? How can you kind of give us a
Yes. Oh my gosh.
glimpse?
I s- it was I still feel like somewhat surreal the entire time. I remember when in prep for the C-section, I was nervous about a couple of different things. Things happened so fast. But I remember when they said, okay, she's coming out. I remember when she cried, I cried, because I felt like in that moment I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. Like, she's here. Like, I can hear her. Of course, I couldn't see anything, right? Because, but I can only hear her. And oh my gosh, that was amazing. That was, I cried. And then I do remember they gave her to me, but I felt like I couldn't spend that moment with her because I was very, very nauseous. My blood pressure had dropped very, very, very low. Apparently, I had lost a lot of blood. Um, so they did, everything ended up still being fine though. It was maybe after about 15, 20 minutes, my blood pressure normalized. So that was fine. But like how I felt was from being very, very nauseous and dizzy to realizing where I was and everything was fine. After that, we stayed at the hospital for 2 nights and everything was fine. Vitals were good. He was great. Nothing was wrong. Breastfeeding, I think, is beautiful, hard. hard because it's new for me and her, right? Like this is not, I think every mother, every new mother, I guess it's gonna be new for you and the baby. It's not like the baby is breastfeeding in the tummy, at least the thing. So we're trying to figure this out, but it's also extremely natural. So I'm enjoying it. It's just a learning curve. It's frustrating, because obviously I think she wants to feed. Um, I am thankful though that everything, it came in as it was supposed to, but my milk supply is lower. So I've been working with, the lactation nurse that's with the practice. She's working and helping me try to like build that supply. So,
Good for
but
you.
I am thankful for I really am. I'm enjoying it. But yes, the learning curve it can be frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't we do two things? So I want to make sure that we get to your blood pressure spike, right? So
Yes, that's
the
right.
thing about that people don't think about postpartum,
Mm,
and we don't really, I feel like it's not really talked about a lot.
yeah.
That research shows that there's typically a spike in blood pressure between like day 6 and let's just say day 14. But
Okay.
the most recent cardiologist I sat in on their talk, and they said day 8, you typically see a spike in systolic, and day 10, you may see a spike in diastolic.
Okay.
So the hope is that the person's blood pressure just comes back down
Hmm.
and then you just move on. But with some people, that doesn't happen. And sometimes after having a C-section delivery, you see a spike because you've had a surgery, you're taking
Hmm.
your baby, your body's trying to get rid of all this extra fluid. And so you can think that there are a couple of things that impact blood pressure, and increased fluid in an artery is going to do that, right? You
Yeah.
increase blood volume. And so we have more blood volume during pregnancy. And in those first 2 weeks following, naturally, and then if you've had a surgical delivery, then you have more fluid kind of pumped in you
Right.
for your safety, right? And so
Yeah.
the body is trying to get rid of these fluids. And so it becomes a really critical time. And there are a lot of hospitals that now, I won't say a lot, but what they're recommending is that they do monitoring kind of like we've been doing the whole time, but they do it during those first 13 days postpartum, just so that you don't miss a spike, right?
Yeah.
And so
Right.
it's hard to remember to do those things when you're breastfeeding and you have like a ton of other things to do. But the neat thing, I really want to talk through your postpartum because your data was beautiful. You could tell you were getting so much sleep. I was like, okay, she's getting more sleep than me with a newborn. I might need to borrow David, have him, we move in together and him watch all the kids because my husband travels too much, right? Because this is not working. My daughter wake me up every 2 hours and you're sleeping so beautifully. Oh my goodness. And I remember during your pregnancy, you had a headache and, after you had a blood pressure cuff and you're like, I'll get one, like everything you
Yeah.
need to do, I'll get one.
Yeah.
And, really we're tracking
Yeah.
and course correcting. If you notice that it jumped up a little bit, but
Yeah.
you never got above like 130/80. You had just a
Yeah.
beautiful blood pressure,
Right.
very consistent with your numbers the entire time. So
Right.
we're sliding through, like just going through postpartum, great, sleeping well. Because I think that sometimes people think you're doing something that causes your blood pressure to go up when in actuality, the blood pressure management system is simply compromised.
Yeah.
And so it's not that for some people they are like they have to go right back to work. They're dropping
Right.
kids off. They don't have the support that you have.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of see why their blood pressure would go up, right?
Right.
And I often think about that newborn baby visit. That is kind of the first, we really start watching when we know you're going to have a visit
Yeah.
because now you're getting up and like leaving the house and
Mhm.
having to be more busy during that period of time, right? So, but just for context, like you're hydrating, you're eating well, you're resting. I mean, really resting, feet up, resting, sleeping
Yeah.
well at night, breastfeeding, like you're
Yeah.
doing all the things right. And so, all of a sudden, though, it's like you get this spike in blood pressure.
Yeah.
And so it's so good. And do you remember how you were feeling? Do you remember
Yeah.
okay, please.
Yeah. So I remember, so I think, because we were doing our blood pressure before, I was aware of postpartum, like that this could happen. I also had a couple of girlfriends who had a very similar situation, fibroid, C-section, had the high blood pressure. And also I'm a pharmacist, so there were certain things that I kind of like knew. And I was taking a nap one day while I was Sasha was sleeping, and I woke up with this headache. And I typically know when like I have headaches sometimes, but I hadn't had a headache since I had the baby. And then so I immediately thought, let me check my blood pressure. I checked my blood pressure, and it was high. I think it was like 160 over 90, something like that. So had a conversation with David about what we should do. I just knew I needed to address it. So this was the first night, because this happened again the second night when we spoke with you. From that first night, it was 160 over 90. I started to get ready because we were going to go to the labor and delivery, which we learned for my practice, I needed to go to the ER. But even right before we left, I wanted to check it again, and it moved up more. It was like 179 over like 90 still. And so we're like, then we start to freak out. So I'm like, it's going up like quickly. Um, ER experience was not great. So I think like if there's an opportunity to go to labor and delivery, it's better because they actually have OBs there. And ER, you do have to advocate for yourself in different ways because I do realize that there was you may have an ER doc that is going to be looking for certain things, and then some of them may not. So when I finally did get back there, and every doctor or even the nurse that I had spoken to, everyone was impressed that I had asked, or that I kind of knew kind of what was going on. But I asked for urinalysis. I asked for, there were certain things Catherine said to make sure that you get this data. So I ended up getting that data and that information before I left and feeling good about that information. But quite frankly, they didn't do anything while I was there. I think I just had a whole bunch of water. That was it.
Mhm.
And it was taking so long. And I actually I wanted to go because I needed to feed the baby. So they didn't prescribe me anything. I remember leaving, but the blood pressure had dropped. So the blood pressure dropped and my data looked good. Labs looked good. Urinalysis looked good. So since it had dropped, I left with that, with this like mother bear instinct that I need to feed my child. Next day, blood pressure was still low. Like I think when I left the hospital, it was low, but it was still on the cusp of high. So I think it was like 140 over 80 or something like that. The next day, it had dropped back to my normal 130 over 70. Everything's fine. 2 days later, it goes back up again to like 160 over 90. And that's when I remember talking to you. And we really tried to get some help that night. We didn't end up going to the ER, went to urgent care. Um, and I also had tried to get some drugs, I say drugs, something prescribed for me that night to hold me over. But I wasn't able to get that. So the next day, I already had a doctor's appointment that day. So I went to the doctor. They had prescribed me Lasix with potassium. But the funny thing was, the night before, I had spoken to a doctor, and she said that the next day, I will be given Lasix and potassium. But when I got in, the nurse practitioner told me, let me have that I'll be having labetalol. So I spoke up then. I said, that sounds great. But the doctor before did say Lasix and potassium. Is there any reason why he's switching back to labetalol? And because I'm a pharmacist, I know those two drugs. I know how they work a little differently. They both work on blood pressure, but Lasix really helps with fluid retention. And so she then said, okay, let me talk to the doctor. So she calls the doctor. The doctor does say, yes, I did say Lasix and potassium. So I was on that for 5 days. And then after that, blood pressure went back to normal, even better than it was before. And it's been that way since.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
was about I guess like a week and a half ago.
Yeah, yeah. So here's what I love about this story. I mean, you had to do a lot of advocating for yourself.
Hmm.
And the thing is, when someone goes in, their blood pressure goes up post delivery. I was listening to a cardiologist and they talked about how if an ER doctor is going to discharge you, the best thing that they can do is refer you to a cardiologist. So don't just send you back home if you
Mm,
have elevated, let's say, troponin or BNP,
yeah,
or your blood pressure is out of control, or you
yeah,
have if something's going off with your liver enzymes, or you have more protein in your urine. Just have there be some follow up as opposed to giving fluids, which may get your blood pressure down and make it look normal, and then you
yeah,
head home because
right.
then you can have those spikes, right? And so it was good that you already had a plan in place to
Yeah.
talk to your OB and kind of figure out where to go from here.
Right.
And having someone that you can reach out to over a night, I think is so important. I think it's important for every mom. And so if you're listening, and one of the things that you really want with an OB provider or a midwifery practice is
Yeah.
asking you to call in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Because then that way they can write you prescriptions, they can kind of
Yep.
do things, and you can be ready to take the next best
Yes.
step, as opposed to, I mean, can you imagine like waiting all night with no answers, and no guidance as to like what you can do while you wait?
I know.
And the thing is, I love that you asked about the Lasix, because the last talk that I sat in on, the cardiologist was just talking about how effective early intervention is, specifically with 5 days worth of a like a type of Lasix. I forgot
Yeah.
what she mentioned. And they
Yeah.
were talking about how both immediately, like what you're experiencing, and long term, they're seeing blood pressure controlled. And when you don't have the early intervention, what they see is people diagnosed with chronic hypertension at week 12, and then continuing to be on blood pressure medication
Oh my
for the
gosh.
rest of their lives. And
Oh,
this is happening, right? Because sometimes you take the different medication, right? Because if someone mentioned that one first, it's like, okay, if she had said labetalol first, then maybe you would have been like, okay, well, let's stick with that. But she mentioned the Lasix, and it did the trick. And that's what studies are continuing to show.
Yeah.
That is best practice, if possible, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really good. And yeah, it's been low. And even I went to the doctor today, and it was 120 over 70, 75 or something like that. So that's really good.
It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that for women listening, you should know that there is increased risk through the first year post-delivery, right? And so with every transition, just making sure that you're continuing to, whether it's you or somebody else, making sure that your body is okay with the adjustment, right? Because you're going to get back into traveling. I'm sure in a couple months you'll go back to work, and then you're going to have like, you're continuing to breastfeed. At some point, you're going to stop breastfeeding. You're going to, things just change. And so knowing that our bodies need that time to calm down is really, really important, and just completely heal, because we feel well. Like after you have a delivery, you feel great. Especially if you can sleep and rest and have family to help and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we have to understand that underneath the surface, there is so much that has to take place for us to get back to our baseline.
Yeah.
And there's no need rushing there. Just allowing our bodies to do what they're designed to do, just like we did during pregnancy, just like before pregnancy. What does that calm down period look like? And it looks different for different people, but as long as you can allow your body to rest, it's like, why not? Because it gives you more time to bond with your sweet baby too.
Yeah.
So I have two questions for you, two more questions, and that'll be it. I would love for you to tell us, why did you say, I want Operation Miss on my team? What was it about the program that you felt would be important for your pregnancy?
Yeah. Well, because I'm a healthcare professional myself, and I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for some time, as well as I am a huge advocate, as well as somebody who wants to increase research and knowledge of healthcare disparities in African American women. I realize that there is, or there needs to be, more advocacy, more knowledge for us. And so when this opportunity came, I felt, well, I need to have an opportunity to have a support. Like, it's good to have support with other people who are knowledgeable. And, this is the one body that I do have, and I want to be smart about it. So when my sister told me about you guys, plus again, like I said, for me, it's not just physical, it's faith as well. I said, well, I don't want to go through this journey or this process without having that type of support. So I think this is very important for everybody. I've told a lot of people, I think everyone needs to feel comfortable with what they're, with how they want to do things. But for me, I think it was that. It's just the fact that I had knowledge of the sometimes the disparities that do happen because of the lack of knowledge or access to data or information or support. And when I do have that, when I did have that opportunity to have it, I said, well, let's do it. I think this is a smart way of doing it, you know. So that is why Operation Mist for me.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy that you chose. I get to see when we were at your baby shower. I was at your baby shower, and I saw all the people who came from Florida, and I know some were in Georgia, and you had people from all over to come and
Yeah.
support you. I was like, this is what pregnancy should look like, you know? And you could tell from the conversations, just people talking, that they're not just people who are showing up for the shower, they're people who will show up for you.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
getting to see that is so beautiful and so important. I'm so grateful for every bit of you all's journey that you've invited us on, and even Lisa and being able to see their sweet baby. And, you know, because that was where we first met. And
Yeah.
I think that for us, the smartwatch is good and it is important for data for sure. And the connection that we have, which is where I really started thinking about it more like a sisterhood. Like, how would I want a sister to interact with
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because providers sometimes, when I think about like a provider, I don't always feel the love. You know what I mean? Like, not that they have to be like that.
Yeah.
Like, if you're good at what
Yeah.
you do, I actually don't care.
Yeah.
But I do want someone
Yeah.
I feel like I can call in the middle of the night. I can send pictures to. I can
Yes.
like just
Yes.
be vulnerable with. And so
Yeah.
when we get people like you have no idea what a gift it is. If someone says, well, I didn't message you because it was really late at night, that would break my heart, you know, because that's
Yeah.
why we're here, right? The watch
Yeah.
connects us, but it's the friendship, the
Yeah.
relationship that makes this whole thing
Yeah.
work, right? And
Right,
so
right.
I'm
And
grateful.
I would text you all kinds of things or say all kinds of things that I was like, and I think the first couple times I did where I was like, okay, I'm about to ask about sex and marriage, right, during pregnancy, or about to ask about this. And you know, the first two times I did and I was nervous, he made me feel so comfortable. After a while, I just was like, I'm gonna ask, this is fine. She's okay. Like, I don't have to be embarrassed about this, you know, like, and you're so right that, and even my husband started to realize this, you know, he realized the comfort that I had. And he's like, she's amazing, she's great, you know, like, so because he realized the support that was there and the comfortability that I had. And everybody needs that. You really, really need that. So yeah.
I appreciate that so much. Appreciate both of you so much. And I cannot wait to meet Tasha. But
Yeah.
okay, so last thing. So for moms
Yeah.
listening, well, let me just leave it open for you. What advice would you give? It doesn't matter what mom is listening. But
Yeah.
initially I was thinking, what about someone who may be running into difficulties along their journey, whether it's the pregnancy journey, the fertility journey, postpartum journey? What advice would you give to them? Just woman to woman that you think would be helpful for them in this moment.
Yeah. Oh man, I think like what I said earlier, I think that other people may not, and they don't sometimes understand the intricacies of the journey, right? So when you say, I'm struggling with getting pregnant or the infertility, you know, not everyone understands. And I think that I can say to you, and this is not advice or anything yet, but it's just, I, I see you and know exactly to some degree what you are experiencing, whether they're different things. I understand it's like it's almost like a day by day, week by week thing, you know. Um, I would say like what how Catherine encouraged me, you know, try to remind yourself or keep top of mind good stories, successful stories. Um, Try not to think about all of the bad stories. So that's the first thing I would say that definitely helped. And find out whether that's people that you know, or people that you may not know or someone else will know, or that you read in the Bible, if that's you believe. Those stories are helpful. Um, you do need something to help you get through each day, and then each week, and then each month. Take it day by day, week by week, month by month. And I think the other thing to remember is, if you are wanting to conceive and you're wanting to be a mother, I think just fundamentally know that that is a good thing. Like, you striving and wanting that is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And the fact that it is a good thing, and it's something that God has naturally made us to want, and I think it's aligned with what God wants too. So be comfortable with being bold with that prayer request, being comfortable being bold with doing what you can to get your body ready for it, your mind ready for it, because it's a good thing. And then also know that I think this is kind of hard sometimes to hear sometimes, but I think timing really truly is really important. I think the right timing, things will happen. And like, one more thing, can I say that try to, while you're in the process doing the day-to-day thing to get you to the next day, or the week-to-week thing to get you to the next day, celebrate those small, tiny things, because those will help you. So those are the only things I'll say. And I think, probably in a nutshell, it's do whatever it is you think you could do to get you from day to day, with positivity, and thinking of the good stories. Like, wrap yourself with the good stories, less of the bad ones, and know that it's a good thing, that what you want is a good thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So beautiful. And when you said celebrate, because it's like you read other people's stories, then you start to reflect on your own. Christy,
Yeah.
every time something amazing would happen in your journey, or baby would start
Yeah.
moving, or you get
Yeah.
the genetic testing was positive, or I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like it was positive
Yes.
results.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was like, I was so excited. Just like, oh my gosh, he is showing himself faithful appointment
Yeah.
after appointment. And sometimes those extra
Yes.
appointments, it's like you get even more testimonies, right? It's like
Yes.
you could look
Yes.
at it as,
Yes.
oh my gosh, it's so stressful, I have to go back and forth. Or you could look at it as, I get to see my baby more, hear my baby more,
Yes.
get more
Exactly. Exactly.
baby perfectly. It was
Yes.
so beautiful to watch that celebration. Every time you would
Yes.
say, thank God, thank God, thank God, he's so faithful, I would read your messages, and you could just feel your faith fueling the journey. It
Yes.
fueled the journey. It is fueling the journey, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing I'll add to, like, if I think about before I got pregnant and I was, waiting, I think if you're a person in that time, just know, I think that you're not by yourself. Because I think the times when I was sharing about the doctor's appointments, I left and I didn't get positive information, or I just didn't have any information. Those are very frustrating things. And I think just knowing that at that moment, it can feel very like isolating, because sometimes you're not getting the comfort from the doctors at the time, because they have multiple other patients too. Like, they're not there for just you, or other people just may not know how to say the right thing, right? That even though they may be trying to, even at the time, my husband, the words he chose all the time weren't the most encouraging in those moments. I needed certain other things. And so just know that in those moments, if it would be wonderful if each one of those women in those lonely times were able to acknowledge each other in that time, so that you could feel together. That would be beautiful. But just know that, yeah, in those moments, you're not alone, because other women do sometimes feel that way. Um, so I just wanted to say that too, that I think it was very easy to feel alone during that time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for
Of
taking me.
course.
You are 1 month out and some
Yes.
days, right? And
She was a month, November
time,
1st.
right, to do this, and I don't take it for granted. I love seeing you. I love experiencing your energy. I am so happy that your story is documented so that when Sasha hears it in the future, she can know that nothing is impossible with God. She
Yeah.
will be able to go to the Bible because of how you and
Yeah.
David will raise her, but she'll be
Yeah.
able to listen back and say, my mom and dad are my testimony, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so this story, this conversation is very special to me, and I don't take a moment of it for granted. And I know that women need to hear that nothing is wrong with them, you know,
Mm.
and that they're not alone in thinking that there could be something wrong, and that
Yeah.
when there's a deviation from what society feels is normal, God can use his design just as he put it in your body to bring
Mhm.
forth life. He can, and he
Yeah.
did in your story. And so someone needs to hear it, someone who's not wanting IVF, because some people do, and that's fine, or
Yeah.
IUI. But for people
Yeah.
who don't want it, they can hear your
Right.
story and know that in his time, it will be perfect.
Yeah.
Your story, while
Yes.
it seemed like it was like, okay, bleeding in the first trimester can be scary. Your
Hmm.
baby's here, right?
Yeah.
Fibroids,
Yes.
you know, that you thought were completely removed. You see one, and your
Yeah.
baby's here. You had a
Yeah.
blood pressure spike, and you are still here. Your baby's here. And I just want moms to hear these stories, and they're coming because people like you are willing to speak up. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We will be friends forever, sisters
Yes.
forever. And I just look forward to celebrating more. Baby Sasha is going to be absolutely fierce. She already is.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
thank you very, very
Absolutely.
much. Yes. I
Thank
love
you so
you.
much for
And
reminding me. I love you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And just even this talk reminded me of so many things. So thank you so much for allowing God to use you multiple times in this past 10 months, and I know in the future as well. You're doing God's work in this, and also in reminding them of who God is and God's design for women. It's just amazing because there are so many there are so many of us that yeah, we it's sometimes very easy to get distracted or very fearful. But thank you for walking hand in hand with me in these past 9, 10 months. Or 9 months, 10 months. Yeah, 10 months.
So welcome. It was my pleasure.
All right.